Welcome back to If I Knew You Better. I'm Brendan Davis, your host, and my guest today is WEIKO LIN. WEIKO is originally from Taipei in Taiwan. He moved to Los Angeles when he was around 8 years old, though, and he's been back and forth a lot. He is primarily a writer and filmmaker, and he also has a big theater background. As he talks about in the episode, he was really a theater kid. Among the things he did that really caught my ear was he produced this full original musical with 16 original songs that he also wrote. He described it as sort of about the Asian parachute kid experience, and this really put him on the map back in college. It was a real professional production, not just like a student production, but that basically, got him, he got busy with film, that put him on the map and got him notoriety. He got into the film world, and that, gave him the confidence to really dream big. And that's part of what really moved me about his story. He learned a lot of lessons from that he put into this recent book, which is how I came to know him. He has a brand new screenwriting book called Crazy Screenwriting Secrets, and I have been talking about this a lot. I found myself in conversations at a couple of events, either as a speaker or as a guest in the last few weeks. I got to read this book in its pre-publication form so I could be one of the people to maybe, I wrote like a little blurb for it. We'll see if my blurb makes it in there or not. But the book is really great. Even if you read a ton of screenwriting books, if you're interested, what I liked about this is it is a art and craft book that covers all the essential things, but it feels very personal. He has a interesting take on things. It's a combination of the practical plus the personal that makes it very memorable. Part of what makes it unique is that he has a lot of specific China insights related to China Hollywood stuff. And although it's written from the perspective of someone who is from China and the greater China area, as we say euphemistically, and also has all this Hollywood experience, it's written to really help people from quote unquote Hollywood or the international world to understand dealing with China in terms of the film market specifically. It also functions as a primer on the Hollywood system for Chinese who are trying to go global and work from China into the international film world. So it works in both ways. I've been recommending this book a lot. It is published by WEIKO Productions, and they have become very good friends of this show and me specifically. I had Stephen Katz on previously. I have Michael Weese himself slated for an interview coming up soon, and I'm really happy about this because their books made a big difference in my trajectory and my formation and have continued to inform things in my life as I've rolled along here. And I'm excited to bring some of their authors also to this show. And the main focus from WEIKO's book, the kind of the final takeaway of what he's aiming for, I think he talks about this really well in the book. His personal mission is in sync with this, is about creating stories that can translate and resonate globally with audiences. In the case of China Hollywood stuff, and of course we're having a difficult moment at the moment in terms of the trade war, and hopefully this will resolve itself in a positive way soon, but stories that have some kind of a family-related theme. He really talks about that as the secret sauce, and we get into more granular detail. If you're actually in this market, in this business, this industry, you'll find some things that you may already know, or it may second things that you've thought about, or it may be new information if you're just getting started. But when you think about things like Pixar films, they have these family themes. That's pretty common that's actually what unites them, or even as WEIKO points out in the interview, the Avengers films. Right? That's a type of family. Also, Fast and Furious, those shows, that franchise has done very well here. That's a kind of a family as well, right? So those sorts of stories are what can resonate and broadening out a bit more globally, right? That's part of why those films work so well globally, is they have some sort of a family theme. And even if it's not the same family as an audience in India or the Middle East or Western Europe or Eastern Europe might have, there's something about a family type of a dynamic that's relatable to audiences pretty much worldwide. So just a little tip, and I've been learning this myself, but it's something that's become really super clear that is really part of the secret sauce for making something that will work globally. So I hope you enjoy this episode, this interview. Visit the blog that is linked in the show notes here to find the links on WEIKO. I'll put in the pre-publication link for the book, and you can check out more about this online. But for now, please enjoy the interview with WEIKO LIN. WEIKO LIN, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, Brandon.
I'm very glad to have you here. We got to know each other through your upcoming book, which we're going to talk a lot about here as we get into the show, because that's a great framing device. You talk about your history and your career path in here. And of course, this has a lot of China-related elements. So let's get started right away. How do you introduce yourself to people who you would like to know better?
Bilingual writer-producer for film and television.
So what do you consider to be your roots?
I would say Los Angeles and Taipei. So I was born in Taipei and then immigrated to the States when I was 8 years old with my mother and 3 older siblings. So in terms of roots, I grew up in LA pretty much most of my life, but I also spent first 8 years of my life in Taipei. But I also went back to Taipei every summer and as well as Christmas time. So I really do feel those two are very constant roots, Los Angeles and Taipei.
Do you feel like, and we'll get into the deeper, more thoughtful things as we go, so you don't have to do this super forensic answer, but in terms of being from Taipei, I know from your book how, you mentioned the business opportunities and the things that this has opened up, but just in terms of sort of culture, you moved when you're so young, although you visited a lot. Do you feel like you sound like you're probably majority like LA guy in terms of your cosmology. But how do you feel that being from Taipei sort of helped, set you off into the world a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Growing up, so I kept up with my language, and really thanks to my parents. I never went to Chinese school or anything, but in terms of at home, because my parents never spoke really English to me or whatnot. So just speaking with them, it's purely Mandarin Chinese. And I would just never thought my cultural background and my language ability would ever help me in my profession as a screenwriter. When I first started, there was not really the whole China, business aspect of it, or even the being a storyteller of an inclusive background that would have helped. And but in terms of roots, absolutely, because in the Chinese culture, ancestry, where you come from is everything. Is everything. So growing up there, and then my dad still lives there, my sister lives there, my brother lives there. So after my siblings finished college here, they went back to Taiwan to do their work, and also Greater Asia, not Taiwan, but Hong Kong as well. So in terms of me going back, I really spent, I would say from age 8 to, now, I would spend about a quarter of the year in Taipei and Greater China. So and more closer to adult, hood, kind of the work and business stuff. I've been in Beijing as well as Hong Kong, but like the Taipei, Hong Kong, Beijing. I spent a good quarter of my year there. Yeah, that from your book, I remember how much you discussed, being able to work in this China Hollywood space as such an asset, and being that you are from this neck of the woods and have the language and cultural knowledge is really a big asset. And so I will definitely want to drill down into this here in a little bit. So you think coming from here, is there anything just in terms of storytelling, in terms of what wired you to really be a screenwriter? When did you realize that's what you wanted to do? Yeah, it's always those things. Right now we have this whole thing about, seeing people who look like you on the screen, or stories created by people by you. And for me back then, there was like one guy and one great guy, who was Ang Lee. So I would say, I think every kid at some point, when we play, we imagine our imagination go out, like, I want to do in a movie or TV show or a cartoon, or I want to do something that's kind of creative and then imaginative, in that realm. And I think Ang Lee, being from Taiwan, and this is back then when he was doing his Taiwan movies, that was all three of them, right? The best foreign language film were nominated for Oscars. So going from The Wedding Banquet. So I remember watching The Wedding Banquet in the theaters and Eat, Drink, Bear, Woman in the theaters. And that was so amazing because I knew I wanted to do this, but I didn't know anyone else. I had no idea how you would do this. So, so kind of growing up, I would say seeing that for the first time gave me the encouragement. And being the youngest of 4 kids, I'm about 5 years. There's 5 years between me and my sister.
All right.
So I was almost like the only child. So I played with, kind of, I had no playmates except for myself, basically, imaginations and creating stories. And, I don't have the whole, like, I was on a camera and 8mm. I don't have that kind of story.
Right.
I was left home by myself, and I had to just be imaginative and make up stories and have so much fun, being in it. And I kind of thought, oh, could you do something like that? I have no idea how it worked, but then, obviously in the beginning, I was thinking director is the way forward. But anyway, to answer your question, Ang Lee, with the fact that I just remember sitting in the theaters, and it was the Samuel Goldwyn company film release. So it wasn't like right nowadays we have the Monterey Park, you have the Atlantic Times Square, you have Chinese audience watching Chinese movies, right? But back then, man, it was like all ethnicities, Western audience. We really only a few Taiwanese or Chinese or Asian audiences were in the theaters, but it just transcended such a universal way. It was that was fantastic. We're saying like, wow, a story from my homeland, and then it's being told in my native language. That was in America, and then audiences were consuming the story. And I thought that's amazing, So that's how I started.
That I can imagine the impact that had, and as a middle-aged Caucasian guy, it's I mean, of course, I've had kind of the opposite experience, but of course also being grown up and especially living and traveling and working kind of all over the world and knowing people from all kinds of places. That really, I mean, it's been a while that I think my eyes have been open, but it really drove it home, and especially kind of the social movement of the last few years here has really put a fine point on it. And, it's great that you had that one guy that you had that example that you could go, oh, look, wow. Yeah. Somebody did it.
But I think you're also in a very special position, and it kind of just your perspective, because you're there in China and you see that the world's bigger than just wherever your hometown is.
Sure.
And I think as much as travel is so easy now and communication, when international is so easy, it is still most people don't know what's outside of where they're from. And then I was fortunate in terms of having immigrated. I mean, if never came to America, I would just think the world is Taiwan,
Right.
And then China, Taiwan, Taipei, I just think it's like in Asia. I just think the world is just Asia. So obviously I know there's Japan and Korea. I wouldn't really know what, Europe really was. I wouldn't really know what America really was, except what I see on television. You know what I'm saying? So I think by us being that, because the world is getting bigger and we're more of a disconnected world right now, but I think by having, for example, you being, living in a different country that's, probably initially outside of your comfort zone, it broadens, just like we're global citizens, really.
Absolutely.
So I think that's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. That's how I look at it. And that was a very conscious, that was a very conscious move and a long time coming. And there was a lot of international work prior to China for me. So it's been really influential and informative. Let me ask you this, because you have this really eclectic background and all these great milestones. And I was telling you before we started the show that my intern has got your book, and I forgot to claw it back out of her hands. I just got back from a trip myself. So I didn't have a chance to go grab it to have that as a reference in front of me. But I remember, I mean, you have so many milestones, and you've had, academic accomplishments and awards, and what do you sort of consider to be your first kind of real success, and where did it go from there? Just a little bit, kind of give us about the short-ish but relatively comprehensive highlights for you, and then we'll drill down into that stuff.
Sure. Well, it's something it's related, but not completely related. But I just remember, when I was doing grad school at UCLA, I was getting my MFA in film and television, on screenwriting. But I'm really a theater kid. Okay. I started in theater. I love theater. And then I think my first real success, even though it's not a financial windfall or anything, but I just remember I had the opportunity where, the UCLA Royce Hall, which is seats about 1,300 people. It's like prestigious groups go there, but student groups were able to put up, through the kind of student organization. So I wrote the book and lyrics and produced and directed a full-out musical, 16 original songs.
Wow.
So I'm talking about from scripting, songwriting, to production.
That's huge.
And I did it, and that's like one of my biggest accomplishments.
Yeah.
And in terms of like, it was a multi-ethnic. We got Caucasians, we got Black African Americans, we got Asian Americans, we got Latino.
That's
and
awesome.
Just people went in love because of storytelling, and it does have an Asian element into it. It's about Parachute Kid, about during when I immigrated. Now with Chinese students, immigration to the United States is very common too, where kids are basically left here by themselves, and then growing up, whether you're wealthy or poor, there's like that kind of like latchkey kid mentality. So it's basically about Parachute Kid, about an Asian immigrant kid who's here, but then growing up with this other young people who are latchkey kids, who are basically trying to foster their identity and their own kind of alternative families, but with latchkey kids, So latchkey kids, Parachute Kids. So anyways, that's my proudest, because I was like, oh my God. And I look back, it's been 15 years or so, right? Over 15 years. I look back and it still stands. It holds up. I never pursued trying to get this set up.
I was just gonna ask you that. Have you tried to get it put up anywhere?
No, just because film work got quite just busy, theater. So it's like a long journey. But I'm starting to get back into the professionally getting to theater just as of end of last year. It's kind of working with an agent in New York and then trying to get that out. But the musical, but going back to basically that, I feel like, wow, that show, that kind of gave me the confidence. Like, it wasn't just like a quote unquote student show where there's like, oh, it's a student show, you make excuses, there's mistakes. It was in looking back, and it's just even now looking back as an adult, thinking like that was a decent, that
was a production.
Really.
That was
a production with 16 original songs, and we just built it out. And then the cast, some were musical theater majors, some were not. So it wasn't restricted to anybody. And I love that, and that's what I love to do, is like, don't restrict people. And that's why I did the book, is people think like this. I mean, the title is Crazy Screenwriting Secrets, but there's no secret. I think the more people know, the better. The more people know about how to, people have these dreams. I feel like, and they feel like it's so distant and so so far, and don't know how. And I just kind of, it's like, it's not in my book, I'm not sure, remember, it's like, it's not rocket science,
Sure.
It's not rocket science, but just here's a little guide. Here's a little kind of a tip-in, and anyone could do it, So
yeah, well, and that's part of what I really enjoyed about the book, and I do like the biographical aspects you detail in there. And so the book's not out yet. When it is out, I'll be sure to update this show with a link to it. So if someone's listening to this soon after release, the book's not available yet, but it's coming out very soon. And they may have a blurb in there for me, depending on if my words made the inside page. I was really happy to get to read it. And part of what was great about it was just the fact that I think you found it's kind of hard to reinvent the wheel, right? I mean, there have been plenty of writing books, but I appreciated how your perspective was a really interesting take on it. And I've struggled with how to summarize it, other than to say that it's the kind of practical from someone who has read and absorbed and understands all the conventional wisdom and is able to shine the light on that and reference it where needed, but has really developed other insights that are their own insights. I mean, your take on it was clearly your take on how a lot of things work. And sometimes there are moments where, where you basically state, this is how it should work, and then this is my experience of how this has worked. This is how to circumvent this problem. Here's how I circumvented it. And I thought it felt very, very, very personal. The other thing that especially was unique about it was the China aspect, and we'll come back to that. I want to talk about the first part for now. What motivated you to write this book and to take the approach that you took?
Yeah, I mean, that saying, right? There's and thank you, by the way, for taking time to read the book and blurb on it. Really appreciate it. Such an honor. But in terms of coming up with it, it's, how they say, like, all screenwriting books, every screenwriting book, it's all pretty much talking about the same thing, right? It's the same thing. So why am I going to write another book? And that's what everyone's had a disclaimer, it feels like, in every book. Why another like Save the Cat? Why another screenwriting book? Why are we doing a screenwriting book? There's so many blogs, books out there. You know what it is. But, one of my great mentors said this to me, that whole thing where basically every plot story has been done pretty much, right? Right. Every story has been done. There's nothing truly original. And But he said this to me, but the difference is it hasn't been done by you.
Right.
So that's why, and then instead of me just regurgitating what's out there, I just kind of took the best part of I had the privilege of, and then the fortune of studying with some great teachers and masters of the craft, the privilege of working with some super smart executives, producers, and directors, super brilliant writers, which is really the top of the craft. And I just basically took bits of them from all of them that worked, that I thought were great, that were awesome, and I put it together. But of course, my take of it is, you can see that it's kind of hidden, but we don't want to confuse the people. That's a culinary. So I approach screenwriting in a culinary way.
Okay.
I'm very big about the way we consume stories is how we eat.
Okay. Because
I feel like stories is a very human, it's a very communal experience, and that's what food and eating is or should be, right? But of course, we're so busy nowadays, we don't sit together and eat and really enjoy the food without checking our phones and all that kind of stuff. So it really came from that, if you will. So why should I do it? And also in terms of just my thing is, obviously not everyone who, I've been teaching screenwriting, I've been writing screenplays, but not everyone goes and write a book, right? I mean, that takes time, to do so. But I think it's also, from my China experiences, I feel like, I would like to really talk about global, that hasn't been done specifically, and especially with China being the second biggest box office and soon to be the biggest box office in a few years. I've been saying that for a while, right? That it is just, you have to work together somehow. Yeah. So then that for me, it's like, well, I had a bit of insight just as a screenwriter. So I'm not a business person. I'm not, I don't know deals. I don't know, all that work. But I do, not I know story, but I had feel a little bit some experience in story. So, and then from being two cultures and actively being in two cultures, right? There's some people who grew up, who maybe were born in another country, came here, but just has really not,
they
not
dropped
connected.
The first one a bit, yeah.
They dropped it, exactly. But for me, I've always been, I go back every year. My family is Chinese. We're Chinese.
Yeah.
So we talk about where your 老家, your old home, your old home, where your ancestry home is. I'm very connected to that, So I'm not sure if that answered the question, but
I think so. I mean, I was, you putting the personal take on it, and in terms of specifically what struck me about it was that aspect where I realized, and from your TOC, from your table of contents, as I'm looking through that in the beginning, seeing how, you cover all the basics of writing and practice, and you talk about the industry and how things work, and you cover just like everything that should be covered. And then I'm seeing that you have this series of chapters toward the back where you have the special focus on the Chinese market. And of course, that's something that not to make too much of it, but I mean, that's what I've been working, with a heavy focus on the last, better part of a decade at this point. So I read those chapters first, frankly, and I was kind of blown away because you really well summarize. And I was saying this to you also privately, I'll say it here, is that the way that you summarize the nuts and bolts and the thou shalls and the thou shalt nots, which, some of that shifts and some of it is pretty much carved in stone. Those chapters, like anybody, even if they're not a writer or don't want to write, but if they're just trying to understand this market, I'm going to be referencing that. I'm going to be saying you need to get this screenwriting book and read these chapters, even if you're not a writer, even if you sell insurance and you want to do it here. That's a bad example. You can't do that. But I think the idea applies, even if I randomly picked a bad example out of the year. What is it, for the sake of this? We don't have to do too much of a teaching kind of segment here, because anybody who, my other podcasts are all about China, and this was the one that's not meant to not be that. But of course, I'm in China, and I do get guests who have a strong China connection, so we end up talking about it. I'll cross post this on Big Fish in the Middle Kingdom, which is my China podcast, which has been around a lot longer. In terms of sort of the summary, though, for the people who, what are the top handful of things that you say they're kind of specific and granular about what is unique about this market, and What are sort of the hit list of things that you tell people when you want to give them the 30 to 60-second summary, and assume that they're fairly savvy, they're smart people otherwise? What do you say? What do you say that's not something that they probably know already?
Well, I'll just jump right to whatever the first thing came in my head is, well, the thing that most people don't understand, of course, people understand, there's Chinese studios, right? There's just like the US, they have the different studios. But the main thing is it's a director-driven system in China, right? Okay?
Yeah.
So there are Chinese studios with infrastructure for distribution and whatnot, but in terms of the creative development, in terms of, because the director, financiers, people will finance that director. Right. So in a way, they have their own studio. And so basically they have everything all packaged together. Then they take it to a quote unquote studio. Then they right. So there's not that kind of pipeline. I think that's kind of one of the myths, one thing that people don't understand as much is that it's very director, which is it's that system, which doesn't mean it's the wrong system or the right system. It's, it works, doesn't it? Right. Wolf Warrior 2, this movie, I'm sure you talked about in the podcast, made over $800 million. Right. So we don't need to go change that up, do we?
It's working for somebody. Yeah.
It's working for somebody. However, what I hope to do is from the screenwriting perspective, hopefully not to do, but more to get people just hopefully just kind of be one step closer in kind of talking to each other, is that in China is that both have to respect. So here's the takeaway, right?
Yeah.
Both sides have to respect the ways that both countries and cultures tell stories and how both sides, how their system works. Yeah. Does this make sense? Whereas
Absolutely.
I think what happens is now is China, we have this, it works for us. Look at $800 million box. We're doing pretty good in such a short amount of time, right? US goes, we're doing pretty good, right?
Sure.
We got Avengers that's breaking box office in China, so we're great. But how about now we've got that, but how about let's get, because as someone of Chinese heritage, I would love to get, Chinese stories out to the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And in China, I think that's one thing where the US can help, right? Because they are global producers of movies, right? As we can all agree on. But China, obviously, producer movies as well, but it's really for the domestic market. As
Exactly.
I'm sure you and stuff. So, which is great. And a lot of people, well, we don't need them. We don't need outside. We just stay within. But Hollywood's a success. And respect, and it's kind of high, kind of storytelling, connecting the world, if you will, right? Is because they go global, right? So I feel like we do need each other, don't we? Yeah. And then China needs, and America needs China, is so we can understand what's the audience so new, but yet such a big market, it's such a big consumership. Understand how can we tell stories that will resonate with them, not necessarily Chinese stories that right, that can resonate, but just types of stories that can do well, that people can resonate and escape to the story. So, in my opinion, it's like both sides could just be one step closer to that respect. Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of the stories and things that you are following or you're curious about that you think might make some good fodder for this?
In terms of from the U.S. perspective. Yeah, I think you should take a look at what in terms of stuff I'm following is, I think the second and third and fourth tier cities in China, right? That's the majority of the movie consumption. So it's understanding the culture, right, of that and the social kind of economic differences. I know this sounds very, sociology or something like that. But
no, I'm going to follow up on this. I just spent a week in this world. So you said I'm listening to you, and then I'm going to be able to add to this maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, life is not everywhere in China. Most of China is not Beijing, Shanghai, the major cities of the world. Whereas it is still, they're still farmers, right? Who's raising a couple, livestock to make a living. And what do they want to watch?
Right.
Does that make sense? Is that by seeing all that glitz and glam, that kind of stuff that that, you know, the first tier cities are used to, but but it's just like in America too. What's the common, you know, not everyone, New York and LA, that's not
Sure.
the whole box office of America, right?
Well, they reminded us of that in 2016 with the election, so.
Exactly, right? So what is that thing? So I think it's always, even though America, the Hollywood system has a pretty good gauge of like, you know, predicting numbers. And of course, you know, you never know, right? Because rich agents surpassing expectations, right? That's why I love. It's like you can still break rules and get out, right? Surpassing expectations. So of what the typical rules like, oh, these will never succeed, quote unquote, because it hasn't been done before, right? So
you'd like to see more stories from like the second, third, fourth tier cities.
I would say stories that resonate with second, third, fourth tier cities.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
absolutely. It doesn't have to come from them, right? But it should be characters that they can relate to.
And I think that's the challenge. I was just down as we talked to offline. I've got a stack of business cards of people I need to follow up with. Right. Legend, which is, you know, Legend and Legend 3D and the big, you know, visual effects house. Basically, I mean, the Pokemon Detective, the Pikachu movie, Detective Pokemon Pikachu was their giant hit that they'd just done. And they're LA, China, India based company. And I was just down there as a panelist specifically about China Hollywood stuff and how to better cooperate. So I was just, and on an earlier panel, part of the focus, one of the bullet points on the different panel was how can the second and third tier, the opportunities in second and third tier cities. And that's part of why it was down in Loyang, which is, I think is technically a third tier city. It was, what I saw was really nice. It was like and granted, they're going to, you know, we're going to have the nice trip because we're the guests for this event and it's at a nice hotel or something. But I mean, we, you know, traveled around a bit through the city. So it's very historic and has, you know, ancient landmarks and an ancient history. But then it's, you know, we stayed in a 5-star hotel that's very modern. So, they're of course trying to do some actual, production. So, you know, for instance, Legends China offices, you know, they found this home because of support from the local and the provincial governments. You know, they landed down in Loyang and they've got this world-class facility that's built from the ground up, and they've both imported people who are at the high end of things and to run things, and then they've trained up people. And so many of the young staffers who I met, a surprising number of whom could speak English. I mean, I speak enough Chinese to chit chat with people, but, you know, I was surprised how many people, spoke some English or very good English, and that they were from there. You know, a lot. I mean, most of the entry level and then a lot of the mid-level people were actually from there, or they were from one of the cities that's adjacent. And that's interesting just in terms of the business development. And in terms of the stories, though, you know, you got me thinking. You mentioned, you know, Hollywood does this, and it's a shorthand for our conversation, but mentioned Avengers. I mean, why? I have my thought, but you're my guest. Why do you think that things like Avengers are the movies that mostly translate and travel? I assume it's because archetypes and language is not that big of a factor. Right. It's a visual thing. Right. Why do you know, and so what, I don't know if you have anything to add to what I blurted out, but what do you think, what are some of these stories that are going to resonate, you know, and how can we nurture that Hollywood or in China or anywhere else? How can we create the stories that are basically independent dramas for the most part, right? How do we create those? And then the marketing and selling those in China is a whole other conversation. Yeah.
Well, you know, I think, you know, movies, you know, I was in my thinking, like American movies are all about families, right? And I think a lot of people feel that way too. A lot of writers and story gurus and whatnot. It's about family. That's why Sopranos work. That's why, you know, Godfather works about family, you know. And I think Avengers, because they do tap into that family aspect of it. I mean, you know, you get the whole special effect, you get a whole different world colliding, but people, I'm not spoiling anything, but people die, right?
Sure.
It's very kind of real. And I think I want to say the word melodrama, that seems like a bad word, right? In terms of melodrama, you know, but I think those elements of it, I'm speaking more specifically for the Chinese audience, you know, they get it.
That actually plays here. Yeah.
They feel for that, don't they? Right.
Yeah.
And you have the, you have the Fast and Furious, which is in a way, it's like a alternative family, right? That they have going on, but there's not as much, people dying within the group, they are, but not, it's, like Avengers, the end game. But in terms of that, I just think it's relating to it. But if you look at Star Wars, that doesn't really connect with the audience there.
Right. It never really had to. It's done. Depending on depending on the actual episode, some of them have done better than others. But it's a hard connect here because people didn't grow up with it.
Exactly.
And the type of story it is.
Hey, I know this is because they did well, and I can never do that. I'm not like, hey, I knew this because audiences taste and they change all the time, right? Their taste for things, it just changes. You have no idea how it's going to go. But there's some fundamental stuff, and I believe the family aspect would never be different.
So you know what I mean? You think that's I mean, I tend to agree. The family films and animation and, what I say, like PG or PG-13 action.
Right.
are the films that like you can, that can come into here, and especially the family films. Yeah. And, and the underdog triumphing, as long as it's not you have to be careful what the corrupt thing to overcome is. It can't be like, it can't be this system, but, they can overcome like a local crime guy, or they can overcome a bad lot in life,
I mean, so I meant family. I meant more like the family dynamics within the genre.
Oh, no, I understood. I understood. That was an awkward segue. I understood your point. I think that.
Oh, no, I see what you got it. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, A Dog's Purpose, that was, whatever the dog movie that did extraordinarily well.
Coco blew the doors off everywhere, but especially here. I saw Coco in the theater, probably the second week of release, and it was still a sold out. It was like, we had to make an extra effort. My girlfriend had to like get on the ticket apps, and it was like 2 days ahead to try to get the seats. It was
right.
People, I mean, again, people everywhere seem to love Coco, but that really, really connected, and it's about family. Of course, the animation part makes it fun and it's a visual feast, but I mean, the story of it, and that's what was highlighted in all the media that knows anything about this, was about that's why, and like talking to people, doing exit polls of audiences here, that's why it resonated so much, was because of the strong family connection. Even if it's not their family, but it's a family, and wow, people can relate to that. People and people can relate to the ancestor aspect of that too.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the ancestor was the premium.
I agree. I agree.
Right, because and I'm not religious, but I have an ancestral shrine to my ancestors.
Right.
My mother passed away 12 years ago. Her photo's on my thing, and it's just, and her plate of names is like, you don't have such a shrine, right? You have I
can see mine across the room, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will do.
Right?
Yeah.
So you have the name cards, or their name kind of plaque. So it's almost like you're not, it's almost like, you're not, it's like the book, The Outliers, right? You are you because of the ancestors, where you come from, So I think that's just so relevant. And I think that's what hit. What's interesting, when Coco came out, I wasn't like, hey, I predicted this, but I was like I think that's gonna connect with the Chinese audience, even though it's the afterlife. They probably say, oh my gosh, the afterlife, all that kind of stuff. But I'm like, man, that's gonna connect hard. What surprised me though was Zootopia.
That's okay. Yeah.
Right? Because Zootopia, I just thought it was a very Americana movie. Very American. Like, man, I don't know why they would, because right, it was number one animated movie before Coco. And then I was talking to just people in China, people who were just like, just kind of socializing with the audiences, the young people there, and they just, different animals, like, different provinces of China, right? People are very different. People in China stereotype people from different provinces, right?
Sure,
so almost like the right, and then being like, oh, just because you're a certain way, you're judged to be that person. So I think, wow, that was like a really cool way. Like, wow, that really connected. In terms of to the Chinese to the audience. I thought was great.
Yeah. That's insight that people who aren't from here, don't have spent time here, don't realize is how how local things are. I mean, it's not a homogenous country. It's
Right.
all these different, people, many of whom don't even just in Loyang, like hearing the super local people who, not the people working in the company because they're speaking more standard Putonghua, like more standard
Right.
Mandarin Chinese, but
Right,
hearing the
right.
local accents, like hearing the staffers at the hotel talking amongst themselves. I'm
Yeah,
like, I don't know what you're saying. I have no idea. You're not talking to
But
me. I have no idea what you're saying,
It's fascinating because you look at America per se, right? You have some from California, some
Yeah.
from New York, or
Yeah.
from Texas. Obviously, we have a different,
Sure.
but it's not that different. It's different.
Right. I'm from the American South, and I've never had a super strong accent. But people talk like
Exactly.
this, or and there's all kinds
Right,
of
exactly.
there's all kinds of Southern accents. I mean, there's
Right,
there's
right.
country, there's polite, there's country clubs.
Exactly,
There's all
exactly.
these, but we all say it. And it's
Yeah.
hey.
Yeah,
It's like we
exactly. But
all
even
understand that.
Right.
But in
even
China,
beyond
it's like you said like 8 different things just now.
Yeah, but even beyond accents, we're talking about also the judgment of difference.
Yeah,
we're not
exactly.
that hardcore about, Texans do this, or
Yeah,
Illinois.
Dongbei Ren are funny. Okay, they are. Well,
Right.
they are funny, but but does being from Dongbei make you a comedian? Just because some of the top comedians are from Dongbei. So
Right, exactly. And then if you look at China, so the way I kind of see it is like if you look at China per se, people when people talk about China, they feel like it's one big 1.4 billion people at the same, right? And it's like everyone from one state or something like that.
Exactly.
But it's not. Everyone have different. There's a lot of differences, but it's actually, I feel it's very closely correlated to United Kingdom.
okay,
How
yeah.
United Kingdom, there's more that cultural difference,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
You listen to
yeah.
someone from Wales, from
Yep.
Scotland,
Yep.
from even just different northern London. There's a very distinct, I think, cultural innate, not
Mhm,
prejudice per
mhm.
se, but right.
Well,
How you do
there's
it. And I think
there's
that's
that there's
close-
that too, but that
Yeah,
doesn't have to be
yeah.
what we focus on. We can still acknowledge.
Exactly. Anyway, so we're off tangent, but
No, it's welcome to the show.
right, exactly.
I should just call this show the Tangent because
Tangent,
that's how we do
right.
it sometimes.
Tangent.
Well, I have bullet point questions to bring us back if we go too far
Sure.
off the farm here.
Yes.
But in terms of what you're doing now and what you've done, and you already mentioned this musical, which sounds like a pretty amazing thing to have done. What has been sort of one of your biggest like public professional sort of achievements post school, or basically what's the most meaningful thing to you that you've done that this sort of basically if someone was to know you professionally now or to get to know you, what's maybe the one thing you drive them to first? What's sort of the top line on your current CV here?
Right. I mean, as not to just because the book is coming out like that, and I don't know how the book is going to do. And for me, not that of course my publisher would not like me to think like I don't care how the book does. I do. I don't care how the book. But I would say this book really.
Okay. Fantastic.
Because it is and as you read the book, right?
Mhm.
Like, I mean, I talk about the craft stuff. I've been teaching for a long time, been writing for a long time. But also give the insights of things in the last chapter, like about falling into place, just everything about me and what I've learned from my family, especially my late mother, kind of like what she's parlayed on is able to kind of put it together in this. Like you talk about, this show's about getting to know quote unquote me, right?
Mm-hmm.
The book it sounds like it's me.
Right. Well,
it is.
That's why I liked it. Talk about that a little bit. Talk about that finding your place. Give us a little bit of that. What's your take there?
Well, you notice like I refer oftentimes to a lot of mentors, so I never like, hey, I came up with this. I said,
sure.
My mentor once said this.
I'll say it. You have a lot of these like in the industry, like a lot of these really name brand mentors and people that are part of your formation and success. So that's all detailed in the book, and it's nice you're not too name droppy, but you have that. Yeah. So noted. Please,
but just like but in terms of falling into, the last chapter is called Falling Into Place. It's basically, writing, screenwriting, feel like, screenwriting, you're going to sell, I'm going to be in the movie business. And I'm not a big fan of like, snarky type, people talk snarky about the industry. Like, oh my gosh, that deal, like kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Even though it's necessary, it's part of the business. But for me, it's really, I feel like screenwriting, and I tell whoever, ask me about writing, because, the fact that I teach, that's what they ask me, not because me, but just because, I know a little bit, a couple steps above them, not above them, but ahead of them. And I said, like, screenwriting, it's a way of life, isn't it? It's like writing, it's part of your life. And it's like, what about your life that's going to inform that writing, So, and kind of falling into place, it's like, for me in the book, I really talk about, and that's something my mentor said to me, and I really embraced it. At first I laughed at it, but, my mentor the last day of class would tell us, you gotta be a good person and everything will fall into place. And I feel like there's so much disconnect, not to be philosophical or go crazy, I'm not doing that.
Please do.
I feel when people, and I do feel like, I feel like a lot of frustration, a lot of disappointments, a lot of sadness that sometimes people, that bubbles, whether concealed or on the surface, is that we're not, we all want to be in place of somewhere, right? And I just feel like if we just kind of like, don't worry so much, right? Be good. And being good is however you define, however you want good to be. You know what I mean?
Okay.
If it's good, it'd be like, take 30 minutes to chat to somebody who's interested in writing, take 20, whatever it is, never expect anything back. I'm not talking about go clean up at the beach, which is a great thing to do. I'm not talking about, go do the soup kitchen. We kind of tick off like, here's my, just like whatever you feel is part of your thing. And then with that, I think that will help fall into place and not to worry so much, and I think we worry so much. Right? Yeah. I think we worry a lot. And then sometimes, it's like, have you seen Bridge of Spies by any chance?
Sure.
Bridge of Spies. I love this line, when Tom Hanks' character I forgot what the actor's name is, but, talking, it's like, Tom Hanks, like, Tom is a lawyer, basically helping, basically defending the Russian spy because, but later on he's going to be sent back to Russia and probably executed for whatever his thing. Yeah. And he keeps like telling the guy going, hey, aren't you worried? You seem so calm. Aren't you worried that what's going to happen to you when you go back to Russia? And then he goes, would that help?
Yeah.
Would that help? No, it wouldn't. It's whatever that is, So I just feel like that kind of mentality and that kind of feeling that will just kind of, and when we tell stories, it would just be coming from a good place versus just like, you know what I mean? Telling stories that's not like to make a buck or to become famous or become whatever that is, right?
Right.
To get on, which is great, to get on those things. But if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But just kind of quote unquote, stay the course. So that kind of thing's all about like writing. It's writing, not just like, it's a craft of it, but who are you? Like, again, I like this movie a lot, actually, is with the Star is Born,
Yeah.
A Star is Born, and all the whole thing's about what is that you want to say, what is that you want to say? And I know so general. I'm all about cliches, by the way, because
they're useful as a starting point. They're useful to say, let's talk about this, and then let's get into some detail.
Hey, look, cliches are cliches because they work.
Exactly, because they've been proven to be more accurate than not, right?
Exactly.
Until they're not, and then we update them.
Exactly. You just have to go back. It's like, what do you want to say as a human being, right? So to be a writer, not just to be whatever you do, whatever profession you do. What is it that you want to say and be and affect? Like, what is it that you're, life is so short. You know what I mean? Life is so short anyway, so that's kind of my falling place. So going back to what I'm proudest of, this book, because I kind of put all the thoughts in there, and then people resonated, that'd be fantastic. If people don't, if it resonate with one person, that'd be great too, but to me, even though it hasn't had the quote unquote validation yet or ever of anything, but I'm most proud of this book that I put together.
Excellent. Well, I think you should be. I'm going to, as I said, it made a really nice impact on me. I'm going to use it as a reference. I'm going to refer people to this. What do you wish you were better at? With the caveat that, of course, if you really want it, you're probably working on it. But what's something that you wish you were better at? Mine is following through with the diet and exercise program.
I need to do that too, man. I need to.
Everybody could do more, maybe.
Yeah. I think one thing that was better at was business. Business,
Mm-hmm.
and I wish I don't have regret. Maybe things turned out for where it is, and I couldn't do all the things that I've done if I had gone this way. But I think I would have really, if someone had just given me advice to do it, I would have done it. And I just wish I didn't. It'd been so helpful. It was like, I wish after I got my MFA, I would have gotten my MBA as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like if I had that, not because for the degree, but just the knowledge of it, just so I could be, I think I could, but so many great talented people who are business minded, who are also creative, they can partner up with and whatnot. But I would say like if that was better at was business.
I definitely relate to that. My answer to that is that I wish I'd gone to law school. Not that I ever wanted to practice for 1 second, but just to have that. And I was pretty law for a while, and then I started taking. When I got to legal statistics, I was doing pretty good, and the things that were the philosophy and the rhetorical sort of things were actually in my strike zone. And I got to legal statistics, and I mean, I think I got a C minus. I mean, I scraped through there with like the saddest for me, like GPA in college. I'm like, okay, this is maybe not for me. And the more I looked at it, but because I've learned that, I paid for my lack of legal education many times. So. Almost done here. Who or what do you credit the most for helping equip you for success?
Who or what? Well, I'll say I had this fear. So we'll go to what, right? Go to what. I would say what is my fear of death since I was in 5th grade.
Okay.
So I have this intense fear of not because I'm afraid to take risks or anything. Not about it's almost the opposite. So every day since I was 5th grade, and there's nothing traumatic happened. We're like, oh my god.
Yeah, what happened in 5th grade, or is that just when something kicked in? Okay.
Nothing. It was like one day I was in class, I go, I could not exist or something like that. It was weird. And today, every day, it's a quick thought. I don't obsess about it, but in a way, I think that credits to not my success, but because of gets me going, real, I'm not Herman, I'm not hiding in a box or somewhere, but I actually just feel like, shoot, I could die tomorrow, so I'm going to just do whatever I'm going to do. So I think a lot of times people are pursuing things or chasing their dreams or reaching their potential, or it's always fear driven, isn't it? Like they're afraid of things, right? So because I'm so afraid of death, I said, it doesn't matter. So for me, it's like, oh my God, if I'm stressed during a time where I'm kind of, with a project or whatever, anything, stressed getting to somewhere on time, I go, I'm alive,
Yeah.
I'm alive. I'm healthy as far as I know, right? So it trumps everything, doesn't it? Yeah. So I say because of that, my fear of everything else just subsides. Like I'm never afraid to go for things, I'm never afraid to do that. I mean, I failed and fall on my face, but I still just keep going. Because I'm alive. Right?
I love it. I love that answer.
Yeah. Anyway, now who? I just quickly, I know we're wrapping up. Kind of like who is equipped.
Yeah.
But not equip, I guess. But I would just say my late mother. And then I was going to kind of talk about her in the beginning, but, we're getting to all the other stuff. But really the reason why I've kind of gotten to know China kind of world too, and I feel like that's making me a fuller storyteller because I'm a global storyteller versus before I was really in the focus on Americana kind of a world. So my mom, my late mother, this is before. I mean, it's all the things. I broke in with this fellowship where I was a finalist for called a Nickel Fellowship.
Right.
And that's kind of what got me breaking the business. I got my representation from there. But literally after that, 2 months after, my mom, was diagnosed with terminal cancer.
Wow.
So basically, as I was kind of, going through that whole process and whatnot, and how she equipped me to sex, she never said I could not. Chinese parents, Asian, and then she's very Chinese. She's not like a westernized, version.
Yeah.
But what's different about her was that she never said, oh, don't do this, you should do that. Never.
Okay.
But she never said like, oh my God, you'll be great in screenwriting. It's never like that. But she never went and doubted. Does that make sense?
Sure.
You don't have to encourage.
Sure.
But I think that's one of the worst things a human being can do to another human being is saying that you can't do this.
I totally agree. Yeah, because you might listen to them, and then they're right.
Right. And people do listen. And that's what happens. They enough, they get on the news bites and everything, say enough, they do. So I kept that for equip, and then for kind of me feeling, and then when I say quote unquote success, I don't want the word success because I'm, for me, it's like feeling satisfied,
Sure.
I guess, right?
Sure.
Content, if you will, right? Falling into place, if you will, is being able to have the opportunity to tell stories of my heritage,
Right.
And
Nice.
my big thing. Like, I want to tell stories of my heritage, not, globally. In whatever way, and I could do that. And then, so my mother was basically, before I had no idea what the Chinese film industry is. I speak fluent Chinese. I go to, Taipei all the time. I don't really, that's not really on my trajectory, but I think it would be relevant to me. But basically, on her kind of dying wish, sounds very kind of Hallmarkish, but she really said, like, I hope one day you'll be able to teach Chinese writers and make Chinese movies.
Yeah.
Chinese language movies. So for that, I really took it to heart, and I really kind of, like what you did, almost a decade ago. Yeah, I went out there in 2011 or something like that, and I just really opened my mind and went to China for the first time. Just really understood what that world is. So I have to really pay it homage to my late mother.
That is a beautiful way to ask you the last question, which you might have just answered, actually. So you tell me if you don't have anything else or not. What's the best question about yourself or your story, or that's on your mind that I didn't ask you?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. You brought it around. I like how you steered it around. Well, WEIKO, I would like to think this is the first conversation of many. I'm really glad to get to know you and to hear a little bit more of your story, here in person, and really love the book, and I wish you all the success with it.
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry, another thing is that, the Chinese edition, I'm not sure my publisher mentioned to you, is coming out in China as well next year.
Oh, is it? Okay. Well, I was going to say, I guess I skipped over saying this because I know this already and I forget to mention it, is that I'll put the links in the show notes. Again, the English book is not out yet, but I'll put the links to Michael WEIKO Productions, the publisher. And again, I will update this, once the book is out. I'll go back and I'll update the links. So if someone's listening to this, we're recording this first day of June, 2019 in China. So if someone's listening to this a few months down the road, well, when is the book actually released? Do you know?
July 1st.
Okay.
July 1st.
So if you're listening to this after July 1st, you can go get the book right now, wherever you get your books. Yeah. And if you're listening to this in the first few weeks after release, then just be patient, but it's worth it.
Right.
Yeah. WEIKO, thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Ben. Thank you.
All right, that's the show this week. Don't forget to visit crazyinagoodway.com to learn more about WEIKO, to find a link to his book for the pre-order, or just to learn more about this show or my other shows and meet some interesting new people on the various interviews that I've been lucky to do. Please share and subscribe this show, rate it, review it in your favorite podcatcher app. It really does mean a lot. I appreciate it so much. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week.